What is the future of the United Kingdom? The country has been so chaotic recently with political woes and the economy in the rubbish, as they would say. Will the UK keep the U in the K, and why are they going through this? First things first, the UK is an island, bruv. Well, I guess Great Britain is an island consisting of the three main pals, England, Scotland, and Wales, and the Northern Ireland sits out here staring off into the Atlantic somberly. There's been some pull from these three outer countries, but let's be honest, England keeps them in line easily. It's just the largest, most populated, and richest of the bunch. Let's get back to that island part though. Yeah, this waterway. This separated the UK from being a poor backwater, kind of like Lithuania, to being the power. Like, the power. I mean, the power on Earth for a while. Water means fast movement, water means trade, and water means blockading other nations. Britain controls the water. This wasn't really always so. The wind kinda made them lucky in this war, but after that they promised they would always have the strongest navy in Europe. This is what made the UK. It wasn't the Scots threatening to get drunk and invade England, not the English starving the Irish, not the Welsh just chilling here. It was the English Channel who separated them from Europe. Cause let's be honest, the actual land here is not that magical. Sure, the UK is temperate, it's a good start, but the food growing capability isn't great. There are many rivers, particularly the Thames, Severn, and Firth of Forth, to develop inland. There's the Tees-Ex line, which separates the lowlands from highlands, also separating farming from separatism, and normal sounding English from...
This is the thing, it's alright when your eyes are not going and happy.
And then there's the hard work they put in to make their waterway map look like this, which helped a ton, but if they never realized how important naval power was, they wouldn't have dug the canals in the first place. It's the reason why Britain was the first place to have these towers puffing that exotic pack. They were the first to industrialize because of the water. First of all, they had a ton of traders, manufacturers, and businessmen who decided they wanted some sort of power in the country, you know, to keep the tea and slaves moving. So it'd end up with things like the Magna Carta, Glorious Revolution, and the world's first constitutional monarchy in power, with Parliament originally made for the rich people to give their opinions on running the country. Still not really great for the average bloke, but it was better than an absolute monarch taking all of your bread and maidens. Parliament was just better for business, which led to industrialization. The UK is just the right spot to spawn this new technology. There is so much water to move stuff around, the rich Parliament let the industrialists keep their money and protected their business rights. In fact, they usually were the industrialists, and those French bastards couldn't just attack the place whenever they wanted to. It was perfect, and it made the island by far the richest place on Earth. At least at the time. But while they were going through their change, they were doing it pretty much alone. They had to figure out how to industrialize by themselves. You know, how do you get the steam to move the wheel? How do you get the wheel to shred the cotton? How do you get this hat even taller? It took the nation about 7 generations to industrialize. For you Gen Z kids, 7 generations ago was the generation before the lost generation, the ones born around 1860. So because it took such a long time, the birth rates never catastrophically fell, or at least not nearly as fast as other countries is. They had time to adjust from the farm to the factory. And well, the extra people, just ship them off across the empire, so birth rates kept high. So fast forward to today, and because of that surplus population making the map turn to this, now the colonies can come back to Britain, being able to speak English now. The British demographic structure is stable and actually growing, particularly from immigrants who can mend into British society much better than some other European states have. I guess that's what happens when you mend British society into them first, huh? Compare this to other European countries, Germany, Italy, Russia, Spain, who maybe industrialized a little too fast and collapsed their birth rate by urbanizing too fast, which meant that their demographic structures are like this, aka about to die soon. So this is all to say that the land and people of the UK mean that the country, despite all the drama, all the booing in Parliament, and all the awful food, it's a stable nation. They're not going to collapse, and they're not going to be involved in a potential European collapse. That's not to say they don't have problems. I mean, look at their economy. It's unstable as shite. Because the UK is an island, they love to go on and on about how different and special they are from the rest of Europe. You know, they love to sail the seas. They use the pound, not the euro. They're cool with the Americans, and they hate the Polish. Well, I guess that's typical across the continent. But really, they're nothing but a European, and any trouble Europe is having with their economy, the Brits will follow. This could be from supply shocks, their rapidly aging population, European banks giving out bad loans to shite borrowers, or whole nations not paying their debt back. Whatever it is, the UK will be affected by it. I mean, half of their imports, exports, and investments come from the mainland. It'll hit them eventually. And hit them it has. Look at the British economy recently. The Queen would be shaking her head. Oh, not her. This Queen. Considering how far the British economy has fallen from the best in the world to, top 6, it's appalling to a Victorian, especially in recent years. Real wage in the UK is lower now than it was 15 years ago. Plus, Europe takes longer to bounce back from financial crises, some places still not really recovering from 2008. And because the UK was the first to industrialize, they were the first to move past that, and instead of focusing on dirty manufacturing, they started to focus on high-end, luxury suit wearing, cocaine-driven finance, especially in London, moving their rural factories to cheap China, or more fashionable nowadays, even cheaper India. But remove London and you're left with one of the poorest nations in Western Europe, one a shell of its former self. This hollowness directly contributed to something which has dominated British foreign politics, domestic politics, even household politics. It has been the only thing the UK has been focused on for the last 7 years. Brexit. The country lost its investments, it lost its trade deals, and it lost much of its immigrant flow over the past half decade from the biggest chaos it's been in recently. There was no proper plan made for Brexit. It was kind of just an impulse decision the country made without really thinking it through. You can make a new video just listing all the economic damages Brexit caused, but we can say some here. Imports fell, and as an island who needs imported goods, that's a pisser. Banks transferred over $1 trillion of assets outside of the UK, going to the EU, or more realistically, over to the US. The Brexit deals have been the center of British politics for the last few years, and honestly, it's going to be pretty hard to make a cohesive trade deal with the bureaucracy-loving European Union, who took decades to make one with even Canada, which is a real bell end for the UK, who, dependent on imports, has been hit pretty hard by supply shocks, causing some of the highest inflation in the Western world and the highest in the country in decades. And then there's the political chaos. Oh boy, if you aren't aware of who this is, here's basically what she did. She became the prime minister after Boris resigned. The Queen hated her so much that she instantly died. Her mini budget crashed the economy by scaring every investor in Britain, almost sending the pound down to dollar or euro level, and then she left. Basically throwing themselves into Brexit with no deal has left the British a crisis they need to deal with still for years to come. So how will modern Britain survive going into the world solo without its EU daddy and without their best buddies, France and Germany? Long story short, they won't. First of all, when it comes to security, Britain is one of the most globalized countries on earth, having a pretty high rate of importing and exporting. It's almost like they used to have a third of the world to pull resources from. Second, they could kick it with the Scandinavians. They're not really into the EU too much either, at least Norway isn't, but they have proper navies, great demographics, and most importantly are linked to the UK energy-wise already. From these fans in the middle of the ocean and undersea pipelines pumping Norwegian oil, Britain and Scandinavia already share their electricity. They can make a mini bubble of influence in the North Sea, which just so happens to be Europe's most important trade route. Thirdly, the English aren't alone. They are bringing the Scots, Welsh, and Northern Irish with them whether they like it or not, and the Welsh happen to like it. How will their relationship be after years of a bumpy road ahead? Who knows? But if Scotland were to split off because of Scotland forever, they would definitely be making a mistake. First of all, they have no people and the land looks like this. Take the UK's dependence on the EU and foreign imports and multiply it by at least 3, I don't know. They would be at the mercy of Europe and England too, and I'm assuming if they split off, that relationship would not be the best. Second, Scotland is already older than England and growing at a much slower pace, so demographic collapse would be first in Scotland, especially if they reduce their main source of immigrants, the English. Third, navally it can't get anywhere without strict permission from the second most powerful navy on earth right below them. And fourth, it would be so financially connected to England that honestly, what would be the point of independence? Just to eat stuff like this without a chav in their ear going on and on about Man United not scoring enough goals? Just stick with the UK, Scotland. It's best for both you and England. As for Northern Ireland, honestly, if there is a financial crisis in the UK and Ireland keeps up its growth, which surpassed then doubled the UK in GDP per capita, it might not be such a bad idea to leave and go join the winning side instead. Unlike Scotland, they'll get a free and quick pass into the EU through Ireland, and relations between Ireland and the UK, despite the hungry past, are pretty good, so I don't think there will be too much bad blood. But hey, Ireland is still dependent on the UK for energy, food, manufacturing / labor, and protection, so Northern Ireland wouldn't be changing too much by switching sides. And then there's the whole of the United Kingdom. What should they do in an EU-less world? Well, they already know the answer. Boris said it when he left office.
Number one, stay close to the Americans.
Number one, stay close to the Americans.
The British have a rough history with the Americans, but let's be honest, who don't they have a rough history with? But despite that, they're probably Britain's biggest ally. Why not make them their biggest trade partner if Europe gives them the cold shoulder? The US can fulfill the UK's agriculture and manufacturing needs, or the integrated NAFTA can, likely with some heavy lifting from Mexico. They already have high economic, political, and cultural ties. They even have the same show about the same culture. But the US has more naval power than the rest of the world combined. So Britain can't really contribute much to that front, but they can still follow them around like a little kid. They do have that capability to at least reach everywhere on Earth. So to stick with the Americans, they'll follow them around. Need to potentially defend Taiwan? The UK will be there. Need to bomb more Middle Eastern schools? Yes, the UK will be there too. There's also the idea of CANZUK, an alliance and free movement between the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, but this would only realistically happen if the US allows it to. Canada is way too integrated into the US economy for them not to have a seat in the negotiating room. So the message after Brexit is clear. Instead of rocking with the Europeans, rock with the Americans instead. There will still be some hiccups called huge recessions and political chaos, but long term they should be fine with good demographics and security. Time to figure out what Brexit really means.